Now recording. So, we got this week, then we got next week. The week after that is review week, and the week after that is exam week. So we've got about a month left to go, less than a month to go, of this semester. So yeah. Any questions about anything before we go on? Before we cover some stuff? So, the subject of the last 2 weeks of class material for us will be MVC architecture. We're going to do the whole darn thing now. And REST APIs. So we're going to find that various aspects of implementing a REST API are made much more simple when we have first implemented an MVC architecture. So we're going to start by taking our password login system. We shall extend it, we shall improve it with new functions, and we shall make it into something more resembling a fully fledged application. And that is going to include REST API stuff. So, definitions. Before we implement an MVC architecture, it is important for us to know what that is. So, can anybody tell me what M, V, and C stand for in MVC architecture?
Model View Controller.
Model View Controller. Very good. We've got the controller. We have the model. And we have the view. This whole apparatus communicates with the client. And you can think of all of this as being located in the server. We're now dissecting the structure of the server. So, when the client initiates communication with the server, sends an HTTP request packet, that packet is received by the controller, right directly into the controller. Very good. The point, one of the main functions of the controller is to be a single point of access for the whole web application. You may have noticed that one of the ugly things that was, one of the uglinesses that we were developing in our previous example was that we've got a whole bunch of PHP scripts. All of these PHP scripts do different things, and the client is expected to know which one to access at any given time. Since we can never trust the client, this means we also can't trust the client to access them in the right order, right? Someone may end up easily on a page they didn't intend to be on, or if we assume that the client is malicious, they might be trying to sequence break us, right? So, all that gets thrown into the bin if everything enters at one point in the architecture, the controller. So far, so good? Good. The way that we program the controller, for us in this class, we're going to be doing a switch controller, which is a a fairly typical way of doing things in vanilla PHP. When I call it a switch controller, it's because the main body of that controller is a switch case. So I'm actually referring to like the programming construct itself. Very good. So, all right. So the first thing that we have to sort of expand our minds, the first sort of new thing we have to learn how to do is write one PHP script to accommodate multiple different request types. Because up to now, when we've written a PHP script, it's generally been to service one type of request, right? In your assignments, you would never have written a PHP script to service both a GET and a POST request, for example. It's either one or the other. This guy has got to be able to do both, and a little bit more besides. Good. So, any questions? You feel like you have a good footing for what a controller is?
One more time.
Sure. The controller is the single point of entry into the web application, the server backend. All types of incoming packet requests go into the controller. This means that we have a centralized architecture instead of a distributed architecture with a bunch of PHP scripts doing a bunch of different things. Make sense? Good. So, the controller itself is supposed to be relatively simple. There are lots of things that the controller is not supposed to do. Number one, it is not supposed to have anything to do with the session database, the files that may be stored on the server, or connecting to an external database. Throw in anything considered business logic. For us in this class, there's not going to be much that's considered business logic. Mostly we're just interested in hooking these things up to different types of data storage. But all of this is the responsibility of the model. So, the first task of the controller, let's write this down. First, controller receives I before E except accuracy, receives packet. 2, controller calls model functions, possibly one, possibly more. So, based on what the incoming request is, it might be a login request, it might be a logout request, it might be a new user registration. We know from our work so far, those were 3 different PHP scripts, right? Now, those are model functions. So we collect up all of those operations that require us to go talk to the database or talk to the session. We put those in the model, and the first responsibility of the controller, once it has parsed the packet, is to decide what operation is called for in the model and to execute it. Make sense? So, this passes control to the model. The model then connects to the external database. Maybe it's connecting to files which are stored on the server. Maybe it's connecting to the session database, right? This would be an SQL database. It can be connecting to any of these 3 data storage mediums that we've talked about in class, right? So, the model function is, like, once you get into the model function itself, it's very, very similar to the scripts that we have already written. When we adapt our existing architecture for MVC, that's the least amount of work we're going to have to do, is convert those old PHP scripts to model functions. Make sense? The code copies over mostly intact. So, good. All right. So the model is activated. It talks to the database. Let's, for the sake of argument, let's say this is a login check, right? The model function decides if the login check succeeded or not, right? So, it passes information back to the controller, right? This might be information from the database. This could be something as simple as logout successful or logout unsuccessful, right? But either way, the model reports back to the controller, how did it go? Did we succeed? Did we fail? Did I get the information you wanted? Here it is, right? Then, the controller takes a look at how the model function went, what it resulted in, and it makes a second decision based on this guy's output. The second decision that it makes is what view to show, right? So the concept of views very closely follows this concept of model-view distinction that you all learned in Java, right? The view is that which the end user sees. What we're really talking about is the client-side stuff, right? We are talking about HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, right? Basically, an HTML file is selected based on what the model ended up with. Now, it's not going to have the .html file extension. It's going to have the .php file extension for reasons that we'll get into. But the next task of the controller is to select a view. Right, so controller calls model function processes, reports back, for view is selected, 5, view is populated with data. And then 6, view becomes HTTP response. So the controller sends the data from the model into the view. The view is responsible for taking that data and integrating it into a web page. Once it has done that, it returns that completed web page to the controller, and then the controller pops that out to the client, and that is how it works. Any questions? Very good. So, if you haven't done so already, please load up XAMPP and get your code editor of choice up and operational. And please grab the zip file of the files from last week's class. We will use those as a starting point for our code today. That will be in the announcements feed. Save that, please. You folks seem kind of glum today. You got a test or something? No? Okay. Just the blahs, the Mondays? Got a case of the Mondays? I'm not a student. Come on, exam. There we go. So, please take your zip file. If you're doing this on your own computer, of course, you can just like open the folder from last class. XAMPP htdocs. There we go. Extract. Extract. There we go. Well, that's kind of redundant, isn't it? There we go. Rename that to reflect the current date. There we go. And let's open everything. Boop. So, for the time being, I'm going to rename the index file to homepage because I want to disable it being automatically loaded when we load the website. Like so. Now, these model view controller files tend to follow specific naming patterns. So, for the controller, let's call it app.ctrl-controller.php. I know, that's too many dots, but it's okay. It still works. It's fine. I tested it and it still works. So, although if you're working on a Windows machine, you will probably have to enable viewing your file extensions, which you should definitely do because you are programmers. So, let's see here. New file. Save that as app.control.php. There we go. So this will be our controller. We want all of our communication to arrive at this point. Very good. So, the first thing that we need to do, before we do anything else, is we need to load up all of the definitions contained in the model. If we don't load that file full of functions, we won't have them to call. So, very quickly, very easily, the first thing you do is you include app.model.php. In fact, you can even, it makes more, at a certain point abbreviating is just like, causes more confusion than it solves, right? We will, of course, need the model. So make a new file. New file. Save that as app.model.php. There we go. That will also be a PHP script. So now we've got our control script directing us to load the model, and we have a model which currently doesn't load anything. So, leaving aside the question of trying to determine if we need the database before connecting to it. This is like an efficiency thing, right? You shouldn't connect to the database if you don't need the database. But for our purposes, we're trying to keep things simple. Pretty much everything we're doing needs the database, so the model should also use our connection script. Now, the connection script, you can think of that as a configuration file, right? So it's, if we're separating our concerns properly, we do not include configuration files in source code files, even if they're also source code, right? So let's make a new file. Well, let's include it first. Include, let's just do connect.php. I don't think that we really gain anything by renaming it to like, whoop, hey, oh, there we go. We don't really gain anything by renaming it to like, app.config.php or anything like that. This file doesn't have to change. Good. So, now, we need to talk about what the API looks like for our database, right? This isn't like the external API that this application is going to present to the internet. This is an internal API. What is the means of communication between the model and the controller? It is simply the functions that the model makes available and how you use them, right? So, let's design it before we build it. Design first, build second, right? So, what operations had we already implemented in this example?
For the database,
Yes. When we access the database, what do we do?
we did CR.
Sorry?
We did CR.
CR?
Correct. You said what operations did we already do?
Yeah, well, from a broad perspective, we have a login system. What operations make up a login system?
Session?
Well, the session is somewhere we store data. It's not an operation. These would be verbs.
Create.
Create what?
Well, really inserts.
Insert, yes. But from the end user standpoint, when we are creating or inserting in the credentials database, what are we doing? Logging in is a separate one, right? Login is a lookup operation. We're looking up to see if this credential is in the database. If we're adding a new entry to the login database, we are registering. So we've got login, we've got register. One more?
Log out.
Log out. Yes. Very good. And I think those are the 3 PHP scripts we have in the middle there. So, I think we didn't do deregistration just for the interest. I think I left that as an exercise to the readers. So, log in, register, and log out. What information is required to log in? What do you need to know?
Obviously, username and password.
Obviously, username and password, yes. Username, password, anything else?
Like, it depends. Are we just thinking very simply, or well, obviously you need like a primary key for it, like maybe like an ID.
Sure, but from the database's perspective, the database will keep track of a primary key. But if we think from the perspective of the user certainly doesn't have to provide their own primary key. They probably don't know what it is and shouldn't ever know what it is, right? So, username and password are all that we need, right?
Mm-hmm.
How about registration? If we register a new user, the way that we did it before, let me pull up the code from before. What do we need?
Name, username, password.
Password and confirm password.
Yes. So we need name, username, password 1, and password 2 for confirmation. There we go. Good. How about log out? What do we need for log out?
Log out button.
Boop. We need a log out button, yes. But in terms of talking to the data systems, how much data do we have to pass to this script in order for it to work?
None.
None. Nothing. Nada. Zip. We can just log out. So, our model then will be composed of those 3 functions. Very good. So, we can go to our model. Function, log in, requires username, password, to be done. Function, log out, taking nothing. TBD. Function, register, name, username, password 1, and password 2. TBD. Okay. So now we know what functions our model is making available. We don't even need to necessarily fill these in yet, but this gives us some basis to start working on our controller, right? Before we had these model functions available, we're basically not aware of what operations our app is supposed to be able to perform, right? So, it's kind of like, because we've divided the architecture between model, view, and controller, we can actually kind of start programming at any one of those 3 points. I think that starting at the model kind of leads us a little more nicely from what we've already done, but you could just as easily start with the view. So, model then. Now that we have these functions, in the controller, there's going to be a lot of yada yada yada, right? But at some point, we're going to have to call login. We're going to have to call logout. And we're going to have to call register. Now this makes it look like, we're going to log in, we're going to log out, then we're going to register. That's not our intention. What we need to do is we need to select between those operations. So what do you think we might use to select between these operations?
Switch case.
A switch case. Very good. So, in general, we are attempting to switch between different types of operation. So it makes sense to make operation the variable. Of course, we don't want to have that as undefined, so let's just leave it initialized as none. This keeps it syntactically valid while we're working on it. Right? Our intention is to hook this thing up to incoming data from the user, right? One piece of information that we didn't have before that we are now going to have to ask the client for is what operation they want to perform. When we were using forms, in our previous run through this, we renamed that to homepage, right? The operation which we wanted to perform was given to us in the name of the PHP script, right? This is no longer going to be the case. We have to get that information some other way now, right? And I'll show you a way to do that. But we can set, we can pull more information from the user if we need to. So let's go back to our controller. So we can assume that we want some cases. Case operation is login. Sure. Somehow we'll want to call login and then break. Case logout. We will want to call logout and then break. Case register. We will want to call the registration function and then break. And then, here's a fun thing. Just for the sake of safety, what if the incoming parameter is none of those things?
Default.
Yes, but what should the default do?
Please select the valid operation.
Sure, we should send some message, right? Keep in mind that most users will view this as a kind of internal website error and won't really have the, programming fortitude to understand an error message even if you give it to them, right? So, what you essentially want to give is like an error page. Something unexpected happened. I'm sure all of you have gotten these before, right? It's kind of our new equivalent of a 404 page, right? But our default is that we want to set an error somehow. There we go. So this forms the backbone of our controller. When you want to add a new feature to your app, you add a new case to the switch controller. Make sense? Good. So, I realize this is jumping around a little bit, but we've introduced this idea that we should have an error page. So, let's make one. Make a new file. This will be our first view file. Save it as error.view.app. Or wait, no. What is it? App.view. No, you can't call it app. Error.view.php. There we go. That will do. It doesn't really matter what it's called so long as the last one is PHP. So, now the interesting thing about this one is that we don't necessarily need to immediately start the PHP tag, right? This is going to be primarily an HTML page, which has some PHP sprinkled in, right? Primarily, we should think of this as being an HTML page. So, let's make an HTML page. An error occurred. And then just for fun. This is an optional extra. You don't have to put this in if you don't want to. Or you could put in something similarly humorous of your own design. Error.png. There we go. Image source is equal to error.png. There we go. So, all right. We have a small web page. Ah, I need to put that in the body though, don't I? Ah, typing words. There we go. Sure. Okay. Now, let's go back to the controller. If you remember our order of operations here, once the model has reported back, once we've called one of the model functions, we then select a view, and then populate it with data, and send it as the HTTP response. Now, other server-side systems have better ways of doing this. This is the way you do this in vanilla PHP. You know how, like, include statements are supposed to go at the top?
Mm-hmm.
Well, not here, my friends. In PHP, an include statement is just straight code substitution, right? It just takes the file and plops it into yours at the point you specify. But that's the important point, at the point you specify. So wherever you put the include statement, that's where the code will be inserted, right? And it only inserts it once it gets there, because this is an interpreted language, right? It can't see forward in the program because it's not been pre-compiled, right? So, in order to show the error page, we include it. Include error.view.php. At the moment, we only have one view, so we have no other options as to what to show. But if I pull back up our home page script from the last time, you'll see that we're basically kind of doing this already, right? We've got the login page essentially here, right? As this branch of the else statement. Up here we've got the secret page, quote unquote, right? Both of these regions of this file are essentially views. It's clunky and awkward to have all of these views in one file separated by if statements. How on earth are you supposed to find anything? So, what we could do to this file to make it better is to take these pieces of HTML, pop them externally, include them using the PHP directive, and that would improve this file already. But this is, a long way from being an MVC architecture. That would put it a little closer to being one, externalizing the view code, right? So, in our controller, we include the view. We actually now have enough. We have enough now to actually load this thing and test it, right? Which would be good because this is a fair amount of code and we should probably check for syntax errors. Because Lord knows I probably made a few. I don't see any missing semicolons, but that doesn't mean there's no missing semicolons. So, localhost 2025-07-21. Boop! So, because we renamed the index page, we no longer automatically redirect to it. We said that the point of entry to this application is control. For now, we just manually click on it. Oh ho! Syntax error, unexpected break. Line 11. Ooh. Let's see here. Ah! I did forget semicolons. Whack, whack. I was right when I said just because I can't see them doesn't mean they're not there. I was right. There we go. So, we're getting a database error now because, of course, we haven't set up the database. So let's do that quickly. New database. Did I save the file? I did not. That's okay. It's very short. Database name yoyoy. Create. Table name credentials. Go. ID. Auto incrementing. Primary key. Username shall be unique. That shall be a varchar of size 64. Why not? I know it changes every time, but that's because it doesn't matter. Password. varchar, size 64, and name shall be a varchar of size 128.
Sorry.
Yes.
Shouldn't the password be longer because of hashing?
Ooh, yeah, that's true. Let's give it 128. Thank you. Now let's just put one piece of data in there so that we have some data in there. Insert into credentials. There we go. Username will be test user. Password will be password, of course. Name will be Fred, the test person. There we go. Execute. New row inserted. Go to browse. There it is. We have some data. Very good. Now if we return to our database, or sorry, if we return to our web page, we should be able to connect. And there we have it. Error. The error page occurs. This is good. So far, so good. Any questions? So now, we have an error page, that's good. We had 2 pages previously in the application. It would make sense now to put those ones into, now that we're adding views. We can, as a matter of fact, copy paste some code out of them. Copy paste. There we go. Go to your home page, or whatever it's called. So this was our inner page, right? This was the one that you couldn't get to unless you're logged in. So let's call it a new, that wasn't mine, was it? New file, save as dashboard.view.app. No, wait, .php. .view.php. Yes, there we go. Yes, error.view, dashboard.view. Good. The purpose of the additional .view and .model and all of that stuff is so that when you're looking at the files at a glance, you can tell what's in the model, what's in the view, what's in, what's in the controller. Now, if you're working on like real-sized MVC architecture web applications, these things will have a lot of views. They will have multiple model files, and they will even have multiple controller files. The modern way of doing things is to have multiple controllers and then have a kind of a dispatcher that loads the controller that you're after. I forget the term for it exactly, but router. A router which then loads the appropriate controller, which then loads the appropriate model files. Like, this use of file names is essentially attempting to replicate a directory structure that you would have in a real application, but like we don't have enough files for that, so this is how we do it. Okay? So, dashboard.view.php. Take the stuff here in your home page and paste it in. this stuff there.
Nice.
Good, thank you. It's a very slight tangent, but you want to see something fun you can do with these that you weren't able to do before? You know how the HTML boilerplate is kind of annoying? You know? Anybody else annoyed by the HTML boilerplate?
No.
Yeah, a little bit. Watch this. Make a new view. Save it as header.view.html, or not HTML, .php. There we go. Snip. Sprp. Save. You can put your head in there as well. And then, because this is PHP, right?
Include.
You can include it. Yep. And down here, you can pull the same trick. Footer.view.php. Like, it's kind of trivial for only 2 lines of code, but like head blocks can get quite large, right? And in theory, this is actually like better design as well, because like much of the time, you will want your header to be the same across like all or most of the pages on your website, right? Like your meta information certainly shouldn't change. Your app or your CSS information certainly shouldn't change. Like maybe you're loading different JavaScript, right? But you know, well, you probably would be loading different JavaScript, but you know, you can work around that too. So if you pull in this stuff, there you go. Save that as footer.view.php. There you go. Then you can just do that in every view. And it's much easier. And you like, it has the additional benefit that like, you know, modify it in one place and it fixes it everywhere, which is another thing that we really like as software people, right? So there you go. It does kind of screw up your indentations, but you know. There you go. So dashboard view, there we go. We've got our log out script here. Let's not worry about that just at the moment. We'll come back to fix that. Okay? For now, let's make the login page as well. So, make, you're probably sick of this by now, a new PHP file. Call this one login.view.php. See, with this type of naming convention, right, you can tell that this is supposed to be a login page as opposed to a login script, right? I don't know, maybe I'm selling it a bit too hard. Remove the center of it. Go to your previous code from previously. Copy it. There we go. Again, we will fix these things later. Okay? So far so good? Wonderful. So now we have 3 views available. The object of our controller is now to select between these views, right? if we go back to our controller, by the way, does anybody have any like syntax errors that they'd like me to take a look at, or is everyone following along okay? Yeah, good. Okay, good. So, in addition to the error file, we now have dashboard.view.php, and we have include login.view.php. So,
Are they supposed to be quotation, commented out or no?
those are supposed to be commented out right now, yeah. But, you want to see what happens if we don't? It's kind of fun. Anybody care to guess?
You get all the pages at the same time.
Yep. You get all the pages, one after another. Right? Including, notice, undefined variable session. We should probably fix that at some point. So, the question now becomes, when do we show the error, when do we show the view, and when do we show the login? This selection is dependent on the information that comes out of the switch case. But there's no, at the moment we don't have any mechanism for transferring data between these things, right? Enter the template array. The template array is the standard way of passing information from your model to your view, also to your controller for selecting which view to use. Basically, the template array is how you send information down through the program, right? The purpose of it is to collect all the information in one place. The alternative is using a large number of global variables. We kind of recognize that global variables are an unfortunate necessity here, right? We need to use global variables, so we collect them all up into an associative array rather than just kind of having a whole bunch of them hanging out, right? If you can't, if you have to have them, you can at least keep them contained. So, the template array. You can kind of think of this in the same way that you think of the session super global, except that it's not persistent and it's not meant to be. But in terms of how you put data in and how you get data out, it works the same way as the session, because it's also an associative array. Make sense?
Yeah.
So, good. So, one of the things that you should do right off the bat is create the template array. TPL for short.
How about template? Yeah, because I was actually very confused if you said template. But template is yeah.
Okay, I'll call it template, but just understand that when you get out into industry, it will be abbreviated in this manner.
Oh, like that for real.
Yeah, that's how it will actually be called. At least if you're programming in vanilla PHP, which I hope you won't be. For your sake, and for the sake of everyone's sanity. So, we have the template array. The purpose of this array, we write stuff into it here, use that down here, right? So, one thing that we can do already, our default case needs to communicate to our view selection, did we hit an error or didn't we? Right? We need to communicate that. So, let's create an error field in the template array. Create an error field in the template array. Make it a Boolean. There we go. Initialize it. And if we hit this error case, we can say template at error is equal to true. We can now use that down here to select the error. To select the error view, I mean. So, if the template array at error, you can say equals true here, but it's redundant. Include the error view. Make sense?
Can you explain it again? Template at error. So, template is an associative array.
Yes. It works the same way as the session superglobal, right? If you want to put a new variable in it, you can think of these as being variables, right? You just write a value into it using assignment, right? In this case, we're initializing error to false, so we're assuming no error has happened unless it's written true either here or in a model function,
Okay.
right? Then, down here, we test to see, has error been set to true? If so, we show the error view. Does it make sense?
Yeah.
Good. Another thing that we can do now is we can create an error message field, which might be useful. Template at error message. We shall initialize that as an empty string, but here, template at error message. Unrecognized operation. Make sense? So now we are not only using the template array to select which view, we are using it to store data that the view will show. Because the point of this is that this string should appear in our error view. Make sense? Hopefully. The whole point of MVC architecture is that it should simplify things and make things make more sense. So, let's return to our error view, if everybody's finished. Do you need just a moment to copy that down? All good? Thumbs up if you're good. Alright, sounds good. So, an error occurred, and now, because this is PHP, we can splice in
The error message.
the error message, precisely so. Just like that. In fact, if we wanted to be, like, even more fancy about it, we would go back to our controller and say unrecognized operation, and then concatenate in the name of the unrecognized operation. Even more information, right? Very good. So let's see how that works. Error, an unrecognized error occurred. An error occurred, unrecognized operation, none. Right? Because that value is still set to none. Make sense? So far so good? Question?
In the error view, page. Yeah. The template at error message, we didn't include like the app.control.php. So, and you said that the template array wasn't exactly a super global. So, and we didn't tag anything as global.
How did we get that information in there?
Yeah, how is it gonna be imported in there?
Very good. So it's like, the key to understanding that is understanding who has included who, right? So remember that app.control.php, this was our entry point, right? It is including the model, right? It is including error.view.php, right? So you can think of this file as executing in the context of this one. All of the variables in here are available here, right? It's kind of one of those trickier points of like PHP. Other languages do this better, right? Because you are passing things around a little more explicitly. But yeah, the template array exists here because literally this chunk of code is copy-pasted into this file. So it exists in this file's variable context. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so this is copy-pasted there.
Yes.
So if you write, template error message here, it's also being written there because everything's already in there as well.
That's right. If we made a modification to the template array in here, and let's say we loaded another view file further down inside a controller, those changes would appear, right? Now, you generally don't do that, right? The view should see the template array as read-only, right? Because basically, if you're writing stuff into the template array here, then you're using model functions inside of your view.
And then what's the point of separating the concerns?
Exactly. You're defeating separation of concerns. Precisely so. Precisely so. So the template array should be viewed as read-only within the context of any view, right? Basically, if you need more information, go get the controller to get it for you, right? But this is also one of the reasons that we put things in the template array to begin with. Because if it's in the template array, the person who's designing the view doesn't have to be the same person as the person who writes the models or the controller, right? It's like person, view person doesn't have to go digging through the controller code or the model code to see what the variables were named. They'd say, oh, it's got to be in the template array, so if I'm really curious, I can just print that thing, see what's in it, and then work with it from there. Right? Make sense? Any questions? Good. Wonderful. So, so we're making good progress. Good progress, good progress. So let's return to our controller. An easy addition at this point, if no error occurs, let's show the login page, right? Else, include login.view, right? Now, once we have login working, we'll put another if statement in here based on whether they're logged in, select between this one and this one, but for now this will do, right? one of the things I'm trying to emphasize with this example is how it kind of like, it logically builds up, right? We add a feature, it gets a little bit bigger, and it does another thing, right? Because the way that we are developing this now is the same way as you add new features in the future to an existing architecture, right? Start small and staple pieces to it. Testing as you go. Testing as you go is the most important part. Login.view. Now we can't do much without our operation being determined. The time has come, the walrus said, to determine what our operation is going to be. It is necessary for us to get this information from the user, or at the very least the client side. So, we're going to receive this in the form of a filter input statement for the time being. So, operation is filter input. We shall receive this from input underscore get, I suppose. It's not terribly sensitive, right? The fact you're logging in isn't very, like, well, I suppose it's still information that could be used against you, but, you know, let's just leave it for now, right? We will receive an operation parameter, filter sanitize special chars, always sanitize, always sanitize, always sanitize.
And that's the same as HTML special characters?
I don't know. I'm
think
pretty sure that
Adam's-
HTML special characters is part of what it does, but I would not be confident to say that it's all it does.
So I'm pretty sure Adams just told us they were kind of interchangeable at this point.
Oh, really?
I can look it up here.
Well, that's not what his notes say.
Is it?
Well, filter input also does additional checking for whether the thing was received at all, and it kind of like builds a couple of things in. So, you know. Let me put it to you this way. I'm rewriting this course for Node. So, yeah. I'm like, what the absolute most current thing in PHP is less interesting to me than it was before I started rewriting this course for Node. Which I know isn't a good answer, but it's nevertheless true. So, if operation is equal to false, well, I don't think false actually, well, false or operation, no, I can't remember which, but one of those doesn't occur in the case of strings. We can actually set this thing. That's an error, right? Before, we would just print an error message and just quit, right? Now, we actually have somewhere to put an error. Somewhere that's nice and user-friendly. Isn't that advantageous? So, there we go. So now the question becomes, given that our views are doing things primarily based on form submissions, how is it that we go about sending this information to the user, or to the server? Particularly when 2 out of 3 of these are post requests rather than get requests. So, let's first go to our dashboard view, and let's fix this guy. So, previously, this targeted logout.php. Now, what PHP script will we be targeting?
Logout.view.
That would be to load the view directly. Remember, in MVC architecture, all packets come in through
Controller.
the controller. All of them. So, yes, app.control.php. Method is implicitly get, but we can make it explicit if you want. There we go. Now, do you know how to attach more data to a form than is visible to the user? This is kind of a fun little trick. Input type is equal to hidden. Yeah. Name is equal to operation. Value is equal to logout. That's one way of doing it. Now, let's see here. If we go to the controller, I'm just going to put the dashboard view in as the thing we're viewing temporarily so that we can test that. There we go. Dashboard. Let's test it. So sessions undefined, that's fine. Log out. You see? Operation log out. There we go. Very good. So, it's no longer true that logout doesn't take anything, at least from the user's perspective, but it doesn't affect our model function, right? The model function doesn't need to know that logout was selected. You know that from the fact you selected that function, right? So, operation, if you want to be kludgy about it, you can say echo, +1, just to show that it's working. And we're actually calling the logout function. But, of course, you don't want to put that in production code. So, the question now becomes, given that this is being received as a post parameter, as a get parameter, and given that our other two forms are being sent via post, how do we square that circle? Let me show you another way to do this. Maybe some of you can guess. So in our login view, there we go. What are we replacing this with?
Registered review.php.
Nope, we're not loading the view directly.
Controller.
The controller.
Controller, yeah.
Yes. app.control.php, and here, app.control.php. Everything comes through the controller. Now, here's something that you may or may not have been aware that you could do. Oh, is that a query parameter? Register. Oh. Still sends it as a get request, get parameter, in a post request. Mind's sufficiently blown? There are other ways of doing this, of course, but like those are like two of the main ones. Between one and the other, this like that's quite a bit. So good. Save. So now let's go back to the controller. I'm going to let's just view the login page for now. And let's take a look at our network traffic just to see that that is working. So let's do login. It's not actually hooked up to the database yet, so we aren't expecting a successful login. Whew. Change your password? Yeah, I would expect so. It's complaining about the function. Yeah. But that's okay. Because take a look. Inside of our payload, we have query string parameters, operation login, form data as well. These are post parameters. Get parameters and post parameters coexisting happily inside of the same HTTP packet. Ta-ra! And you'll notice from the error message here, in order for it to complain that there are too few arguments being passed to the login function, it would need to have called the login function first. So this error, despite being an error, is proof that this works. Make sense? So far so good? Any questions? Doing okay? So, very good. So we are now receiving our operation correctly. We can now begin filling in our model functions, right? So, it is true that login requires username and password, right? Question is, where are those coming from? And a better question is, where should we read those from?
Controller.
Well, yes, in the controller, yes. But we know that we're being passed username and password as post parameters. But the question is, where within this file should we load them? Should we load them here? Or should we load them here? Or should we load them up there? Where should we load them?
Probably load them up somewhere.
Up here? Let me ask you a question. Does the logout function require them?
No.
No. So if we load them up here, we're loading them despite the fact that one of the operations down the line doesn't need them, and they won't be there. So if you do something similar to this, and if they're not there, you put an error, then you actually completely disable your ability to do a logout, right? Or at the very least, you end up in like an inconsistent memory state. So, it's okay inside of the switch controller to read parameters. Read whatever, so the purpose of this block is not only to call the function, but to acquire the data necessary to call the function. Okay? So, here, login needs username and password. Logout needs nothing, so it's probably going to stay this simple. Register requires 4 things, so we will need to gather those 4 things. Make sense?
Yeah.
Separate concerns. So, user, filter, input underscore get. That would have been called username, I think. Check. There we go. Username and password. That's good. Good. There we go. And given that username and password are required for this operation, it's a problem if they're missing. So we should flunk out it on an error if we detect them missing. Question?
How do you know if you should use a set or empty to know like if the username and password are there or not? Like what are you about to use and why are you using it?
I'm about to use user triple equals false or user triple equals null.
Why not set or empty?
Because filter input already does that work for us.
Oh.
So recall that filter input produces one of three values, right? It either produces the thing that you were looking for, which in the case of a string might be with the HTML special chars applied, right? If this is a validation filter and the input fails validation, for example, if it should be an int but it is a string, something like that, the output will be false, right? But strictly false. You have to check it strictly because 0, false, and null will all equate to each other under weak equality, right? Null is, that's your isSet checking. So if the value is not set, it was not derived from the, it wasn't sent along with the packet, then null will be the value coming out. So filter input does all of those pieces of checking in addition to the filtering and the sanitization and the validation. In the case of strings, I believe there's no possible, it's not a validation filter, so you can't fail validation. So technically, this case will never happen for strings. I'm kind of just in the habit. And it doesn't do any harm. So. So in this case, our error message would be something like missing credentials on login. Right? One of the things that you should not do in MVC architecture is exit 0. Don't prematurely end the script, because if you do that up here, it won't load a view. Right? Instead, set something in the template array and let the architecture handle it. Make sense?
Yeah.
Good. So, we've got that. Very good. Let's quickly do the other one as well. Login.view. Password 1, password 2, username and name. E1, E1, and E2. There we go. And I guess I will just use the compact form since I remembered that. Name E1 and 2. Now we also have to pass that. Oh, am I putting this in the wrong case? I'm putting this in the wrong case. Good grief. There we go. Name, username, that's got to have a dollar sign, PHP, E1, E2. This would be missing credentials on registration. Or not credentials, but missing information, I guess. Right? You see how that's like basically the same as up there, except we're just pulling all of the data that we need, right? That's one of the things that MVC architecture is good at, is it reduces operations to like standard sets of pieces of code. This is like, if you're working with a more modern system, like a framework like Laravel or Node and Express or something like that, a lot of this stuff is sufficiently standardized now that it has been removed as library kind of material that you don't have to do explicitly. But unfortunately, again, this is vanilla PHP, so we gotta dig down into these details. And honestly, you can make the argument that like seeing it explicitly like this means you understand what's going on a little bit better. Question.
When you refer to vanilla PHP,
Yes.
what else, what other versions are you implying that there are?
Laravel. Basically, specifically Laravel, and any other PHP framework.
Okay.
Yeah. So when I say vanilla PHP, I mean PHP without a framework, basically, which is this. Yes.
Why are we only checking null and not false?
Because false doesn't occur for strings. It doesn't occur because it's not a validation filter, so it can't fail validation.
But
Right.
isn't the user in login also a string?
Yes, I could remove those branches. Yeah. In fact, why don't I, just for conciseness? Yeah, it's like, think about like your absolute worst case scenario, right? Your worst case scenario, like even under a substitution, like a removal filter, like sanitized string, which is deprecated, sanitized string is deprecated. Under that situation, the worst you would end up with was an empty string, right? You wouldn't end up with false. Although I believe empty string and false will still test as the same as each other under weak equality. So, yeah, okay, good. So now, we shouldn't have any more complaints about not supplying the right number of arguments. We are now supplying arguments. Very good. Our next task, which we should be able to accomplish in the remaining time in class, is to take our model functions and populate them, right? So, okay, before we get there, let's take a look at model.php. We need a session, right? You could make an argument that's like connecting to the session should be the responsibility of the controller. For me, it's like, it makes more sense to put it in the model because it's data and model deals with the data, right? So I'm gonna put it up here. There we go. Session start. There we go. Now, let's do login. We can start by looking at our previous page and seeing where the stuff we've already done is. So we don't need to start a session because we just did that. We don't need to require connect.php, we've already done that. We don't need to take these inputs, we've already done that. We do need the SQL query. So this is where we should start copying. We also don't need to include index.php because that's including a view, which we already are doing. So basically everything from here to there, which I think you will agree is the actual code that actually talks to the database, we're going to copy that. Copy. Pasta. So, very good. Just make sure that these things line up with what they're actually being called. They are not. Notice we called these U and P, so we should modify that to U and P. There we go. Now everything will work out. Now, shall we attempt login? I think that's an excellent idea. So let's go log in. Boink. Response. We're getting our login script back again. There we go. Oh man. I expected more errors than that. All right. So, if you recall previously, session logged in is the session variable we were using to keep track of whether the session was validated. We should use this to select between the login page and the dashboard view. Another thing, though, is that we have a few echo statements in here. Minimally, we should replace these with writing into the template array, particularly this one, which is just straight up an error, right? But here, we got login not successful. Okay, so if login is not successful, where's my message about that, right? Because it doesn't appear to be anywhere. There we go. So, let's grab this stuff here, write it in there. Bad SQL query. And here, it's perhaps not that we want to like state that there's no login, right? Well, let's just leave this off for now. There we go. So, and let's leave that echo statement off as well. But let's just make sure that we are in fact entering the function. I'm a little suspicious. I'm a little bit suspicious. Syntax error, huh? Unexpected session variable. Line 15.
You see line 14, at the end of line 14.
Oh, yeah, that'll do it. There we go. Log in. We're not actually calling the function, it seems. So, let's take a look seems as if we should be. Operation login. Let's see here. So we are getting that far. Okay. Are we getting this far? Oh, I know what it is. I disabled the error message, didn't I? I did. Try that again. Missing credentials on login? Pretty sure no. Pretty sure no, but that's okay. Oh man, did I cavalierly assume that I could finish this in time? Response is 1. Yes, response 1. Oh, yes, because nothing is being shown. There we go. Username, password. Username, password. Should be getting username, password. Okay. If you don't already use this trick, this is a cool trick. If you just echo JSON encode of your get array and your post array, go. See if it actually is where we think it is. Yeah, it's username, password. Okay. So that's not too bad. Let's make sure that this is working. So it should be hopefully interesting to everyone to see the steps I'm following to try to solve this bug that I have, right? You'll notice that I'm checking everything right from the top of the file down, view the variables to make sure that everything is coming in as I think it is, that I'm getting 2 blocks of code that I think I am. The problem is, I think I'm getting stuck on this, which I'm not sure why I would be doing that, because this seems to be, oh, I just found the error. Did you guys spot the error?
You didn't get first post.
Yeah, the computer was right as usual. There we go. Okay. I might leave those in just because this is a teaching example, right? It's useful to be able to see the data. So, that's the error I was looking for. So, when we are inside of the login function, we get undefined variable VBH. Does anybody remember what VBH is from our connection code?
Database header?
Yes, well, database handle. Yes. That is the object where our connection to the database is stored. The login can't read it. The reason is it's a scoping problem. This actually works the same way in PHP as it does in Python. Does anybody know what you have to do in Python to include a global variable in the scope of a function? You have to declare it. So, inside of the model, you have to say global database handle. This puts the database handle into this function, but links it to the global scope. Question?
Why don't we do that global outside of that function? Like for all the functions?
It already is global because of where it's been declared, right? Anything that's declared at this level
Yeah.
is global.
Okay.
The default behavior of functions, again, both here and in Python, when it encounters this, it's assuming that you're talking about a local version, right? But you're not. But you have to declare that by saying, no, I want global DBH in this function, please, right? This line is a little tiny smidge like putting this dot in front of it here if this were Java. Does that make sense? Good. Global DBH. Does anybody else see any global anything that we need to declare as global that we're using in here?
The statement?
The statement? Nope. Like the query itself? Nope, that's okay to stay local. But there's something that's global.
PDO.
PDO? Nope. We don't have a variable called PDO here. It's a variable. Somewhere in here, we need to declare it global. H? No. H is being defined on this line. It's the output of the select query.
RESP. RESP.
Resp? Where's resp? Response? No, that one's also local. That's the Boolean yes or no. Did this succeed or fail? That's okay to be local too.
Query?
Nope, query is okay to be local.
Template?
That's it. Yes. The template array, that's a global thing. That was defined in the controller. Right? So that also we don't have default access to. We have to give ourselves access to it. And I think you can use comma template like that. Pretty sure you can do that. If it complains, then I'll fix it. Boop. There you go. Log in, preview. Good. So it hasn't failed, which is good, no errors. The reason that it isn't showing us the login or the dashboard view is because currently it has no ability to. So, let me drop this one if statement in there real quick and then I'll dismiss class, okay? So, if session at logged in, then include dashboard.view.php. There we go, PHP. Boom. Otherwise, the login view, bing, bang, boom. Save. This should not be in a logged in state because those credentials were bad. Refresh. Interesting. I have that twice. There we go. Refresh. There we go. And now, undefined index logged in. Yep, that's true. That's okay. We'll just leave that for now. Our test user password is our combination. Test user password enter. Oh man. Didn't work. Ugh. Okay. Class is adjourned. We will fix this up on Thursday. Thank you very much.
Can you show the code you ended with?
Hmm?
The code you ended with?
Good thing this is recorded.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna rewatch this.